Hi, everybody. This is going to be on the Rake killer, but I don't think that it was even a murder. So we will get into that a little bit more. I have with me somebody who I've been in a Facebook group with. It's the Todd Mullis Innocent Facebook group, and so we just wanted to talk a little bit about that case. So, hi, Paul. How are you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Good, great. Sorry I was late. Have a little bit of a crazy situation at my house at the moment, but hopefully that will get worked out. What do you do if you accidentally fell on a toothpick? That's that. I think you'll be fine. I think you'll make it through. So, did you watch the original trial? Is that how you got into this case in particular?
Yeah, it was a case. It showed up in a YouTube video feed. I have no idea why, and I think it was the cross examination or the examination by Hughes to Todd in the original trial. And there was something that came up on the original questioning. I don't know if you remember the trial, but she asked him a question about Amy's first affair, and she said, "Do you know that Amy met this guy from the first affair at the hospital?" So she met him at the hospital, and Todd seemed to be trying to be pretty thorough with his response, and he said that he wasn't sure if they met at the hospital or not. And she said in such a disgusting way, you were so in love, you were so open, the communication was so good, but you don't know where she met this man that she had an affair with. And he said, no, it may have been at the hospital, or it may have been an event hosted by the hospital or through the hospital. And she said, oh, so now you do remember that she met him through the hospital.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's not what you asked him. You asked if he met her at the hospital. He was trying to be thorough. And then you said, oh, so now you remember that they met through the hospital. And I thought, well, that's just a really nasty trick. Why would she need to play a nasty trick if she's got great evidence? And that just got me thinking about it and started to look more into the different the case videos. So I watched everything 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I watched, the more I got really concerned that there was some serious questions here.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, that's what sucked me in.
I definitely do remember that part of the trial, and like one another thing that is interesting about that is that like you're not necessarily gonna know where they met, like or the details of their relationship because it's been a secret from him the whole time, you know. So like that's not really all that crazy that he wouldn't know exactly the details of where they met, you know.
Yeah, and I think he did roughly know. He was just trying to be thorough with the response, and she tried to make it seem as though he was being evasive or untruthful, which she knows he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was the first thing that wrote me in. There were a whole host of other things, all the witness testimony and PK and who was the woman, Terry Stainer.
Mm-hmm.
There was some particularly really bad testimony that witnesses gave, and his lawyer not objecting to anything. I mean, all those things stood out to me that made me really want to look into it further.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like a miscarriage of justice at the time.
Yeah, I remember like hearing that he was guilty, like that guilty verdict, and just immediately feeling like sick to my stomach. Like I don't think this guy did it. Like I was like, dude, I just don't think this guy did it. And then I started like looking into it, and like for me, it was like something on like a Facebook post, and it was about him like his daughter's kitten getting run over by like a skid loader or something like that. And so it just made me like they were acting like Todd just was like, "Oh, go get this pet carrier out of nowhere." Like that it wasn't that it was some random request to get her in the barn to like murder her. But like realistically, he's just looking out for his daughter's like cats, you know? And it's just like such a like different light that they cast against him, like than I think he actually is as a person. Like he seems like a hardworking guy who takes care of his kids, like clearly like loves his wife. Because he like believed when she's like when he talked to the hog manager or whatever, and he said he assured him that he wasn't having an affair, and Todd called back to apologize. that part was like, I was like, oh man, that sucks, dude.
Yeah, yeah, certainly doesn't seem characteristic of a sociopath to call the person back and apologize for inconveniencing them. But there were a lot of things that fall into that category. The fact that he was calling people, especially Terry Stainer, and asking her, "Hey, what's your opinion on how I should handle this?"
Hmm.
And I promise that if anybody goes back and Googles any murder case in the history of ever, for the case where somebody called a friend, asked for advice on how they should handle it, and that person wound up murdering the person, you'd find exactly zero searches, because that's not the psychological profile of a sociopath or a psychopath. What
Yeah.
classifies them as a sociopath or a psychopath is that they don't have they're not interested in other opinions, and they don't feel guilt or remorse or the need to consult with friends on how they should handle it. And the fact that Todd did, I can tell you one of the other things that really got me sucked in was the Stainer testimony, where Terry was the one who originally counseled them, Todd and Amy, on the original affair. So it was
Hmm.
at the time of the trial when she was testifying. This was 4 or 5 years prior to the trial, I think. And so Terry knew about the affair, and Todd asked her what they should do, and she suggested they go to counseling. So
Hmm.
he did, to save his marriage. He didn't threaten anybody. He didn't beat anybody up. He didn't beat Amy up. He didn't yell at her in public or anything that we are aware of.
Hmm.
He just said, "Okay, I'll go to counseling." And then on the stand, Terry came in and said, "Well, I told Amy, he's going to kill you." And I thought, well, why wouldn't his attorney? First of all, he should have objected to it, but as hearsay. But why would you not say to her something like, 4 years ago, the exact same thing happened, and he didn't kill her, and
Yeah.
you suggested that they go to counseling, and they did. What happened in between that time and today that you're certain that he would murder her for doing the exact same thing that he knew about and counseled him about 4 or 5 years ago, where he just went to therapy? What changed?
Yeah, and also, didn't she like have like tell him to like go and meet them at the fair or something like that, where she was like
Sure.
on a date?
Yeah, that was another big part, is that she was convinced that he would kill her, yet she initiated an opportunity for Todd to find Amy and Jerry at the fair. She literally set that up and said under oath in her testimony that that was her plan, as if the idea is, if Todd found out at that moment, he would murder her, but anything outside of that moment, like when they got home, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like, so she wanted him to find out by meeting them at the fair, and then everything would be great. And so she actually actively went to try to make that happen. I just find that really bad testimony that Jake, his prior attorney, should have absolutely hammered her on.
Yeah, I don't think he had objected to like anything. I can't remember him objecting to like one thing.
Well, he had no objections to PK and to Terry Stainer. That was brought up, I think, today in Jake's testimony, that he didn't have any objections to those two testimonies.
So, did you watch his original appeal, like when
I
he had
did.
the face mask on and stuff? And he was like, I thought in this country it was innocent until proven guilty, but like it doesn't appear to be that way or whatever. I just thought that was like very striking to me, like as like everything he did to me says like that's what like an innocent person would do, like he got on the stand, he answered the questions, he didn't ever get like upset, he was like calm in his police interview, he's like leaned forward towards the interviewer, he's like open, he's talking to him, like he just, it just always struck me as wrong. And then like, but that lawyer that he had in that case also didn't seem to know the case very well and didn't really like argue for him. So I'm like very impressed with his lawyers that he has now.
Yeah, Hamrock, which was his second attorney, did him no favors. That appeal was, they never had a chance. He was
Hmm.
terrible. He argued all the wrong things. He let the state come in and make arguments that they shouldn't have been allowed to make. So yeah, that was terrible representation. His representation now is phenomenal. The Dean of Neshawat is his attorney, and then the Innocence Project took over to help her out. I don't know, a few months back. They're great.
Do they use students or like young lawyers? Is that
Yeah, I just don't have a lot of knowledge. Obviously, I saw what you saw a couple of days ago, and yeah, it wasn't it didn't look pretty. It looked like a very inexperienced attorney who they were trying to give their turn because they've been working on it. Sort of, I think I went on the Facebook page and equated it to, my 10-year-old son, and all the kids have to get a chance to play in the soccer game so that everyone feels like
yeah.
they contributed. But she definitely didn't seem like she was ready for prime time.
No, but overall, I think they are kicking ass. And for sure, if they had been his lawyers in their original trial, I would say he did would not have been convicted. Like,
It's really hard to say for me because they're not bringing up all the evidence. They're just bringing up things suggestive of evidence that could have been looked into. The major point is to show all the things that Jake missed and not necessarily drill down on all of what those points are.
uh-huh.
So when they talked about, the farmer insurance, obviously that was supposed to have some reference to records indicating that Todd was not in the home but out in the field at the time certain searches were made. That's really just to establish that there were reasonable places that you could go to find reasonable explanations for some of these searches. Who might have made them? Was Todd even there at the time of the searches? But they're not drilling down into the evidence that they'd be presenting at a retrial. They're
Right.
just showing that he didn't look into a whole bunch of things.
Well, I think the judge seems to want to hear everything. She seems to know the case pretty well herself, but I do notice that like when they do get something in, she'll be like, "We're gonna leave that on the record" or whatever. So I feel like hopefully that's a good sign, but I'm not 100% sure that like which way she's gonna go on it because it almost seems like she's like hesitant to make any rulings. Like,
Yeah.
um, which is fine. I don't know like what her judging style is, but like she seems like better than the original judge was. And so I'm hopeful. What do you think? Do you think he's got a good chance?
I don't know, cautiously optimistic. I'm emotionally invested in him getting a fair trial. I thought she was the first day I had some concerns because she did seem a bit wishy-washy on the appeals. It seemed like, or on the objections, it seemed like if somebody strenuously objected, she would go for it. And if they were a little bit timid in the objection, she wouldn't. But I can tell you that every time an issue comes up, she knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
She's following it. She's looking at it. And I get the feeling that she is trying to give a very fair shake to Todd. And I hope I'm right about that. And I hope they do enough to prove it. But that's the impression I get, is that she seems like a really fair woman about this.
She does. She seems like I know she seems to make like some sighs during the but it is almost like she's looking after like a class or something. Like both sides seem a little bit I don't know. It almost seems like they're in college, like doing a practice trial is kind of like the feeling I kind of get from it, the vibe, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that, and why the judge keeps saying, I mean, she probably said it 50 times, this is not a jury trial. This is a bench trial, and they're conducting it as if there's a jury there. So they're doing a lot of background, information with each witness as if there's a jury there, and the judge is saying, "Look, I don't need all this.
Yeah, she already knows.
This is
Do you
just
think they're
going to
doing
me."
it for the media?
No, I think they're doing it because they want to get it on record. I, I don't know. That's my guess, is that they want to approach this as if it were a jury trial, so they don't miss anything. They want everything on the record. And they're just,
Yeah.
if the judge makes them speed through something, then they will. But I think they're just trying to be really thorough. But I think that's why it feels like what you said.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not an attorney. I don't know all this stuff. I do plenty of reading on it, but that's my read.
Yeah. So I thought it was very interesting that they took like the pathologist, Cruz. I don't know what her first name is, but
Yeah, Kelly Cruz.
Kelly Cruz, right? I know she gets like people give her a hard time because she has like a vocal fry and she's pretty, and so maybe they don't give her enough respect. But I did think it was interesting that their expert, I guess they're the plaintiffs in this case, Todd Mullis, is lawyers. Like their pathologist, sorry, I'm trying to spit this out. Their pathologist did use all of Kelly Cruz's own measurements and stuff and seemed to say that she did like a good job overall with the autopsy, but just didn't take into consideration anything else like besides like her own preformed opinion. I think is pretty much like accurate in what they're saying. But like she also like just didn't even look at the medication she was on or anything like that.
Yeah, there were a lot of things missed. Certainly, if you're going to put somebody in jail for the rest of their life and take a father away from their 3 children, you explore everything there is to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't have any question and never went to find out if it was possible that it could have happened in any other way. And what's really kind of troubling to me is that there were a couple things. One, it was introduced that there were only 5 holes in the jacket, although there's some dispute that maybe there were only 4 holes in the jacket. But even at 5 holes, once you learn that there's 5 holes, you have to necessarily relook at it, because what it means is that the fork did not leave her outer jacket at some point in this episode. And so then you have to account for that and say, well, why is it possible, or how is it possible that the fork got stuck in her coat? And what does that mean for how the wound patterns happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I can't imagine. So first of all, Kelly Cruz was on the job for 3 months or 3.5 months, something like that, at the time that this happened. So she was fresh out of school and residency. This was her very first job. In the testimony in the trial this week, I think she tried to say that she had done something like 300 cases at the time of Amy's autopsy, which I think is total BS. And I hope that they go and investigate that a little closer if this goes to a trial. And the number of cases that she would have done that were murders would have been, 5. The number of ones that were undecided were probably 0.
Yeah.
In other words, this is probably the first time she had any case in her entire career where there was any question about the matter of death. It's probably.
Yeah.
I don't know that to be a fact, but it's got to be a number awfully close to 0.
Right.
And to make that determination so emphatically, completely disregarding any possible other way that it happened, to me seems totally irresponsible. And if you're going to do it, at least try to figure out a theory of how those wounds were made in the course of a murder. If you think it was murder, well, tell me how those wounds got made in a murder. Was she on her stomach? Did you knock her down? What happened? How did we get 6 holes with a 4-tine fork and 5 holes in her jacket? How does that happen? And I don't know how you could possibly rule on it without really thinking through how that's possible.
Yeah, exactly. And she said that like it's a practical impossibility that she could have fallen on it and gotten those patterns, but like also it doesn't make sense that he could have swung it at her and made those patterns, because somewhere along there you're talking that there's 2 tines that went in, and a possible 3rd time. That makes it even more like what happened there. Like how do you don't know if it was 2 or 3? Like, do these wounds all go together? Like, yeah, you guys can't do modeling on that,
Yeah. So one of the things that really bothered me with Cruz is she said a few times now in her testimony that she found it completely unbelievable that Amy could fall on the rake, get up, fall on it a second time, get up, and fall on it a third time.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's presented that as being the option that the state thinks it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been presented. But she keeps saying that when she knows that that's not what, I'm sorry, not the state, that his defense is saying. His defense is not saying that she fell, stood up, and fell again. That's not what they're contending.
Right.
Let me see if I get, hold on a second. I'm going to get a fork and I'm going to show you what is being contended.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I have no idea how this is going to come across on the camera. All right, so Amy's back. Let's see, it was down by her leg. Yeah, this is obviously not slanted in the proper direction. It would be perpendicular because it's corn rake. So they're saying she fell on it at an angle.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the angle over here by my face, these two tines were in the deepest. The two tines closest to my pinky were very shallow. So it was at an angle like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so in the struggle, because this handle is down right by her butt, she tried to pull on that handle, which is why her handprint is on the corn rake handle. So she was able to pull out the two tines here that were not in very deep, and these two tines stayed in deep.
Okay, and so it like rotated?
Yeah, and then as she was moving around and manipulating her body, she succumbed to her wounds and she fell back, and it made two new holes. The two that were on the outside stayed there the whole time, and then two new holes got made. That's the theory. Whether you believe it or not, I think it makes perfect sense that that's the way it could have happened. But
well, like, how do you make that make sense if you're saying that it was Todd? Like, how does that make sense in that manner? It doesn't. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's the defense's position. The state's position is that she fell on it, or that she was stabbed with it. He swung it at her 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they're not saying how it's possible that could have happened. How you swing a 4-time corn fork at somebody and leave 1 or 2 holes in them on impact with no scratches on the back of any other kind other than the actual wounds. I mean, there was one little scrape between, I don't know if you remember, wounds C and D on her back, which were the 2 really shallow ones in the middle of her back.
Let's see if I can bring it up.
And that scrape was because when she originally fell, only tines A, B, and C were in. C was very shallow, and as she tried to get the fork out of her, it moved and poked back into D. It's a little hard to do without a visual, but that's what they're saying.
I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Yeah.
Hold on. Present share screen. Oops. Can you see that right there?
Yeah.
You can't really see like what that is in relationship to the, huh?
Yeah, that's a little bit, I think that's the straight on shot. You can't see her underarm.
Man, that rake is quite a thing, huh?
Yeah.
Right here. I don't know where the pictures are. Oh, and like this is where it was at, right? Like, wasn't it like this very, very small area right here?
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't really know exactly where it happened within the shed. We just know that she was at the door of the shed when she was found, with her head poking out as if she was trying to crawl out of the shed.
That is crazy.
So she was right on the door hit, right where the ledge is where you exit the shed.
Do you think that Todd could have possibly been trying to pull the rake out and somehow she had impaled herself again, or sort of like, I don't know.
No, she was not she wasn't breathing at the time that they found her.
So yeah.
So she wasn't moving when Tristan found her.
Also, I just read in our group that Todd kind of had another alibi just by that he sent her to do a job that would take such little time to do. So if he didn't immediately follow after her, then why would he ever even think that she was still in the red barn to go after her to do that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I don't, it's for me, I'm just an evidence-based guy. I want to understand what the evidence says, and that's a piece. But you could make a counter argument to that, and the state, I'm sure, did or will. And so it's not rock solid. It's really good because it means he would have had to know that she was immediately going to the red shed. He would have had to immediately follow her out, run 200 yards, to 100 yards to the shed and 100 yards back, all in the time to murder her and then get back without his son noticing that he was gone and huffing and puffing. But they can say, well, his son was in on it. His son knew. So it's really good evidence. It's just not rock solid evidence. The holes in the coat is rock solid.
Yeah.
The timing of how long it would take to run 200 yards to do a murder on somebody that you weren't even sure was going to be there to begin with is really good evidence. It's just not, to me, not exonerating in and of itself, but it's a piece of the patchwork that they're painting to cast real doubt, which there should be.
But the thing is like the appellate process, I think, is very like sticky on like what constitutes something that could get a new trial, and so there's all these little things that add up to like a big miscarriage of justice. But
Yeah.
is there like that? Is there enough like of a banger that like they can get that new trial?
Yeah, I don't know. I certainly hope so. They have a lot of information. The videotape information was really useful, obviously, that they know that the videotape was not erased, that it was turned off 2 weeks, or it shut off, not was turned off, but it shut off 2 weeks prior to the accident. That was a big piece of information that we didn't have at the trial. It was suggested that he conveniently turned it off and then turned it back on. A couple.
I think his brother had said that the cats oftentimes knock it down because like they like to be in that window, and then so then it loses signal. So if that's like a pattern where it's like 2 weeks off and then a little bit of time goes by and then there's like 2 weeks or like a certain where it's not recording, like that pattern would add up to prove that. And like that's the kind of stuff his lawyer just did not have any interest in finding any evidence that looked anything good for Todd. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was the only thing that he looked at, was that Todd said it was probably the cats, and his brother corroborated that it was probably the cats. But the more solid information would have been, one, what did Todd's GPS cell records show was his location at the time that the camera ceased to work?
Oh,
so if
yeah.
he wasn't on the farm, boy, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And they brought that up this week. Two, that there wasn't anything deleted. One of the cameras, the one pointing at the red shed, just had no information on it at all. We don't have any information that it ever worked, even prior to the 2 weeks when it stopped working before Amy's death. So we don't even know. Those are real questions. Like, Todd's opinion on whether it was a cat and his brother's opinion on whether it was a cat is helpful, but the fact that there was nothing deleted when the forensic expert came in to look at it, that's important information that the jury should have heard. And whether or not Todd was even there at the time was important information. And the fact that it's fairly reasonable to assume that Amy may have turned it off herself because she was having an affair on the farm with Jerry, and didn't want to get caught. Those are very, very reasonable things that he should have brought up at trial. So I'm glad it's coming to light now.
Okay, so I have to ask, what do you think about the 911 call?
So there's if you go on, what's it called? It's called the Laurel. the Laurel and something principle.
I know. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'll try to look it up right now.
Yeah. And probably the better one, or the one I thought was more appropriate, was if you look up green needle and brainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a principle in psychology where if you view something and then are told to listen for it, you're going to hear it. And if anybody watching this goes and types in green needle on YouTube and listens to it, you're going
I'll
to
play
learn.
it right now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. I'll try to at least.
Yeah, there's a better one where it shows the word. It shows green needle, and then it shows brainstorm, and it says it, and you could swear it just keeps switching to whatever you're looking at on the screen, but it's the same recording being played over and over again, because the power of the suggestion of what you're reading impacts how your ears hear it. So it never should have been admissible. They should have brought in a forensic audiologist to analyze it. I mean, that was a huge piece of information that never should have been allowed in, and certainly not allowed in without an expert reviewing it to corroborate that that's what they actually said on the tape. And the fact that he would say that in front of his kid, and then there's testimony this week that Luke Thompson, the deputy, was there at the time that he said what he said. It's got some serious holes in that theory.
Well, like on the phone with dispatch, like, is it more likely that he said, "Go to hell, cheating whore," or 1, 2, 3, 4, like counting his compressions?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's wild that like his attorney did not object to that, or that was allowed in at all. And like, there's another case that I cover all the time, and like it's those things, those lack of like having an actual audio expert like testify and like tell you, like you don't have to just like guess on stuff like that. You should have an expert that's there, that's like looking at that information, and not just a prosecutor who throws it in there and tells them what to hear before she even plays it.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I hope. I don't know if that's something that they're going to bring in this week or this coming week. I don't know if that's part of it. Hopefully, I mean, I like an expert to come in and analyze it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they had the original 911. There was some discussion in the trial today that there was more than one version, and not the trial today, this week, where they discussed different versions of the 911 call. So I'm not sure they have the original, but I hope they analyze it.
Yeah, hopefully. But like, yeah, I think that played a big part in getting him convicted. Like, I think I don't think it should have, but I think it is one of those things that kind of like sticks in your head. And if you heard that, like, then you're going to think like the worst of him.
Yeah.
And just like his demeanor, like, I think that he's like a stoic farmer. And for some reason that like came across poorly to the jurors, which sucks. Cause I thought he was just like, I think he's a genuinely good guy. And like, I thought it was very interesting after trial to hear what Tristan had to say about his testimony, because I think that also played a big part,
Well, that'll be a big subject this coming week, I'm sure, because that was in the in the PCR original filings from, I don't know, a year ago, whatever. So there's big work ahead for this week on what Tristan's testimony was. I don't want to get into that too much because it hasn't happened yet, but
is the state trying to prevent him from testifying again?
I don't know.
I think that's what I had read, which like that's really frustrating when you think the state should be out for like the truth and not just for like holding up an unjust um verdict. And it seems like, to me, it seems very, he at least deserves a new trial. Like that's for sure. At the very least, I think they should want him to have a new trial because it wasn't fair, and they likely have an innocent guy in prison, and they took away like both, like like they lost their mom and then they had to lose their dad too. It just really sucks.
Yeah, I'm I go through, I'm watching the trials and I'm reading the comments, and I'm so surprised that there's really no open-mindedness at all. Even if, for those who think he's guilty as sin, you have this week a forensic pathologist who has experience, 20 years experience, who comes in and contradicts what Kelly Cruz said. You have a biomechanical expert who comes in and makes her testimony. You find out that the videotapes were not deleted, and that Todd was not on the farm at the time the videotapes were turned off. You find out there's blood on the rake handle, which we never knew at trial. You find out there's 5 holes in the coat. We find out all these things that his attorney never did, never asked, that Todd told him that he wanted him to pursue the defense of an accident the whole time, and he did nothing with that, and essentially just disregarded it and admitted it was murder without Todd's consent. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was
anybody, I
crazy.
just think anybody reasonable, whether you think he's guilty or not, should look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of new information that I didn't have before. And yeah, it may have gone differently with that new information. And,
Well, and the cop testifying to the times and having that time incorrect.
the UTC. Yeah, that made me mad this week. That was just another example of, the state lawyering instead of providing information that proves that he did it. They were just sort of lawyering their way out.
Yeah.
So the young guy, who I thought was a pretty good lawyer, who was cross-examining the expert on the digital information, brought up that he made a mistake on calculating the UTC time, and that Hemesath also made the mistake on calculating UTC time, as if those were equivalent. And I posted something on the Todd Mullis page about that really bothered me, because clearly Hemesath didn't know what UTC was. In fact, I have timestamps on my original notes from the trial of a few times where Hemesath brought up that he was making searches at 2 or 3 in the morning, when it turned out he was making searches at 8 o'clock at night. But Hemesath didn't know what UTC was or how to calculate it. The guy who was on the stand this week, the expert, just was asked to make a calculation in his head on the spot, and he just made a mistake.
Hmm.
And the state tried to equate those two as if, well, everybody makes mistakes on UTC, but that's not what happened.
Yeah, and there was like word for word searches that were from the hunting guidelines, but when you put it in context of it's happening at 2 in the morning, then you're like, that's definitely not his daughter studying for
Absolutely.
her hunter's class. So that time like does make a big difference, and it could have like been a big thing that influenced like the verdict, So it seems like there's enough. Like I'm very hopeful, but I'm always like think that he should get a new trial. But my friend was telling me like it's really hard to get like ineffective counsel, especially because he was a privately hired attorney and Todd didn't fire him, which is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is out of my wheelhouse of info that I'm really knowledgeable on, but I'm sure it is really hard to prove ineffective assistance. But if this doesn't do it, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
The guy admitted that he had personal issues during the trial. He brought in no experts he didn't bring in the kids to corroborate that they were looking up the hunter safety stuff or the buoyancy stuff.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he didn't say anything about the quote about the thrill of the kill, which is a Mark Twain quote. And he didn't just go out and get a copy of this quote from Mark Twain's book, showing, anybody can look up a quote from a book. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that he's a killer because he's looking up a quote from a novel. For all we know, his kids were reading something in school that. So he didn't bring any corroborating information. He just asked Todd about it on the stand and never went to prove any of this stuff. There was
Well,
no
and
evidence to back it up.
it's like what other searches were taking place during that time? Like, was it all like these? Was it those searches like back to back to back the day before, or were these like spread out and they picked them out like and made them look like it was like all this forethought? Because like if he was gonna like plan it out and there was a lot of forethought to it, like would he really do it when he's the only one on the farm and his kids are like the only ones there? Like wouldn't he like I don't know. It's just a bad time to plan it. There's nobody else it could have been. If he's going to kill her, wouldn't he want to have like at least Jerry on the farm? He could have done that.
Yeah, look, there's plenty of the cases to be made that are like the hypotheticals, like who would send their kid to find their mother after you kill them. There's a lot of those that I think are totally valid. I don't think they really help in him getting a new trial.
Yeah.
I think there's real data, real information that I think will help him get a new trial. But I totally agree with you. I just don't think that proves anything. It goes into the patchwork of the case, but I don't think something like that is what's going to get him a new trial.
Have you seen like the people who do think that he is guilty? Have you seen them consider like any of the new information, or they're just gung ho on he's guilty?
No, there's no movement. I mean, it's like political conversations. There's no talking. There's no openness, no good faith discussions. I think he's innocent, but if information came out tomorrow that was, it led me to believe he's not, then I'm done supporting that cause.
Right.
I'm not, I'm only invested as much as I can prove facts about the case that point to his innocence. And I don't know that he's innocent. I think he is. And I feel really strongly about that, but I never say I know what I can't possibly know. I feel as comfortable that he's innocent as I can without actually knowing. But I'm totally open to whatever new information comes in, good or bad.
So do you think there is like as the people we like if we see an injustice or something we perceive to be an injustice that there is a benefit in kind of like the Facebook group. I know when I searched for it and I found it, I was like, yes, there's other people out here. And I feel like those particular people in that group have made real progress in his case and made it like did affect him getting to this point where he got the Innocence Project to look at it and stuff. So, do you think as like quote unquote like internet sleuths or whatever people would like classify people who follow cases like this as, do you think there's like it's our responsibility like as the people, or do you think that people are just like messing around?
No, I totally think it's a great thing. There's no scenario where, 2 or 3 heads of attorneys are better than 3,000 heads of people watching the case who are passionate about it, who might bring up something that they haven't thought of. So I think it's really useful. The internet sleuths that do the shows, my knock on it is generally they're just doing summaries. They're not digging into the case to find out whether the facts are real or corroborated or find new information. They're just sort of re-airing what's 48 hours aired and retelling the same story without any kind of critical analysis. That's my beef with that. I think it's a great idea if people actually look into the case, find out if there are facts that don't seem to add up or provide a new insight on how something could have happened. I think that's a real benefit. I think the website for Todd Mullis has been really good. I mean, there's a lot of smart people on that board who are bringing up a lot of good ideas. I'm sure, counsel at some point for him has looked at these ideas.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. My community in particular is like I don't know if you've heard of the Delphi case. It was like a double homicide in Delphi, Indiana, and that one's a rough one, but like yeah, I think that the Facebook group in this case is definitely run very well. they keep speculation to a minimum. Like people are very respectful, and like if anything else, I know that they've written Todd letters and given him like some hope. And I know Tristan has like looked at that page and like that that's kind of cool that his kid like I don't know. I feel like so sorry for his kids because they lost both of their parents and like how confusing would that be when like Amy's parents are saying like he did it and then like especially Tristan like Tristan if he didn't do it Tristan like pretty much knows he didn't do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really sad. And I guess really heartwarming for him and his father that there's so many people out here who are, are pulling for him, trying, looking at every piece of testimony, trying to find things to bring up to help him out. It's just, I'm sure it feels good for him to know that there's so many people pulling for him on the outside.
Yeah, I saw a video that like it was on his because I was looking up his lawyers and I saw a video that like basically was like a shout out to Todd to tell him like there's people out here who believe in your innocence and are pulling for you. And
Yeah.
just like I feel like if this doesn't get him a new trial, I'm literally going to be like heartbroken and feel like there's no justice in America, you know? Um
Yeah.
like just at least a new trial. That's like I think that's a reasonable ask in this situation, especially
Yeah.
because he has life without parole. Like if he doesn't get a new trial, he's gone forever. You know.
There's just too much information to not get a new trial, in my opinion. Again, I try to be as unbiased as I can with this, but I'm just looking at the actual information that they brought in that was new info. I don't see how it's possible to not grant him that if you're a fair-minded person. I'm
Hmm.
not saying you have to, let him out and agree that he's innocent, but I don't know how you can look at what's going on so far in this past week and not say, boy, there were a lot of things that weren't brought into that trial, and a lot of things missed by his attorney, a lot of things. That
Hmm.
was that was about as bad a defense as anybody I've ever heard of getting or saw anybody get.
Well, like to say is murder, but not even bring another person that could have possibly been like is very irresponsible and like definitely ineffective assistance of counsel. Like they it must have been somebody but it wasn't him but there's nobody else around I don't know like it doesn't work, you know.
Yeah, yeah. The what else could have happened is not sufficient for me, and I don't believe that that meets the standard of what a forensic pathologist needs to classify something as a murder. I think it's got to be more than I can't think of anything else that could have happened, so that's what it is.
Mhm.
You need to look into it a little bit and figure out, well, how do you think that murder happened if you think it's murder? What's your
Yeah.
theory on how those that wound pattern happened? Do something. Don't just say, well, she fell on it 3 times sounds so unbelievable when nobody's saying she fell on it 3 times in the first place. You go out of your box. And she seemed very defensive on the stand. I can understand why. Uh, but she certainly didn't see it like Hemseth on the stand. He seemed like a very believable witness, I have to say, like a very honest guy. So did Jake, his attorney. But when Hemseth got asked about it, they asked him, if you found out new information, would you be open to it? And he said, yeah, like really enthusiastically. He's like, yeah, of course, absolutely.
Mhm.
And did you read the PCR? A couple paragraphs. That's like a 25-page document, and maybe it was even more than that, of all the new information that his defense found. So this guy who's so zealously interested in reading or reviewing and open to any new information read 2 paragraphs and then stopped reading. Like if he really thought that he could change his mind if new information came out. I mean, if it were me and I put somebody in jail for life and I
Mhm.
found out somebody saying, hey, there's a bunch of stuff you missed, this guy's really innocent, I would think, holy shit, I got to go look at this. If I put an innocent man in jail, if that really happened, I want to know. I
Yeah.
want to look at all of it. And he didn't look at any of it. He read 1 or 2 paragraphs, is what he testified to.
He
That
just
to me is
didn't seem
crazy.
he didn't seem super I'm not trying to like diss on him. I'm not saying he's stupid, but he just was like whatever, like blasé about everything. And like you're right, like you took somebody's dad away from them, you you don't care. Like they did, there was no blood spatter. There was no, it could have, like, there was nothing to say it wasn't an accident, really, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what they said was that the thing that said it wasn't an accident was the improbability of somebody falling on it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, to me, that's just not enough to put somebody in jail for life. Give me a
What
theory,
What do
you
you
know?
think about the people that say Tristan should have been looked into?
Um, I mean, I think everybody should have been looked into. I don't think Tristan obviously had anything to do with it because I think it was an accident.
Yeah, I
I think
agree. I
everybody
don't.
should have been looked at. Everybody that made sense. I think there's no way on earth that they should have left out that a sheriff of the police department who was involved in the investigation had sex with Amy in the backseat of his patrol car, and that wasn't brought up at trial.
I didn't know that until just right now when you said that.
Yeah, that's, there's stuff that, because I'm not an attorney and I don't know how this works, there are things that they aren't allowed to talk about. Even this week, there are things that they can't say and talk about. And that was one of the things that was agreed upon for the first trial, that they weren't allowed to talk about. That's kind of important information to
Yeah.
say, hey, Travis Hemseth, your good buddy was having an affair with Amy Mullis, or at least had a relationship with Amy Mullis on a one-time basis to something. And he's there, he's involved in this investigation, and he had sex with her, and you didn't recuse yourself from this case or assign it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest. I would have wanted to know that if I were on the jury in the original trial. I think that's important information. It doesn't mean, he's innocent because there was somebody in sex with Amy, but it's important information. You can't leave that kind of thing out. And I really didn't like, I'll tell you another thing that really ticked me off on the original trial. Did you listen to Turbitt's interview of Todd?
The detective or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
The lead detective, Turbot,
Yeah.
John Turbot. So that interview is really hard to listen to because the audio is not very good, but it's about an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
And in that hour long interview, Todd quite literally says roughly 2 sentences in an hour long, and the rest is John Turbot talking.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got deposed by Jake, Todd's attorney, he said Todd had plenty of opportunity to say what his side was.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, if they had a transcript, if they took a piece of paper of everything that Todd said, and then they took all the pieces of paper of everything that Turbot said in that interview, and they dropped them on the floor, and one went floating down Todd's because they had one page of a couple of questions, and Turbot's went slamming down onto the ground because it was 50 pages of him talking the whole time and not giving Todd any chance to say a word. I think things would have looked differently. But then when he said that Todd said, "You want me to admit to doing something that I didn't do," and then Turbot says that he never denied it. I mean, to me, that's
definitely a
perjury.
denial. Yeah, that's.
I mean, that's a perjury statement. The words in English that I did not do is a denial of doing it. That's what it means. He denied it, but Jake didn't harp on that at all. The state let him get away with saying that. In the same way that Hemseth said that when Todd was questioned about the internet searches, and he said, are you the one who looked up wedding dresses or Ohana tattoo, which is a tattoo that Amy got, or going to Pinterest? And Hemseth said, that it was possible Amy made those searches, but not probable. And
it's hilarious to think of Todd going to Pinterest, though. Like,
well, how could he say that it's not probable, that it's possible but not probable that Amy was the one who set up the iPad, who lives in the house looking up wedding dresses? And when I take all that stuff together in my head, it makes sense to me that it was possible but not probable, because the last thing that they wanted to do was admit that somebody else used that iPad. And the last thing that Turbot wanted to do was say that Todd denied that he did it, because those things all weaken the case of the state. And so they just really manipulated things to make it seem as though, you know, it was all fingers pointed to him. It
Mhm.
wasn't quite like that.
It wasn't. I was not like that at all, in my opinion. But like, and then also, what I was irritated that detective did not like film his interrogation or questioning of Jerry, but like went so hard on like Todd, and like there was nothing in his body language or anything that said that he was like defensive, even though that guy was just like harping and questioning and not listening to anything he was saying. Like Todd still didn't seem defensive at all. He seemed genuinely like, what are you talking, like what are you even trying to say? Like he just was like, I don't know. I definitely don't think he did it. Like it was like when the trial was over, I was like, that guy is innocent. Like I would bet my life on it that like he didn't do it. Like it just, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I like to stick to the things that I think are evidence that might actually get him a new trial.
Hmm.
I'm not a body language expert. I don't think body language is even admissible as evidence. But my personal opinion, just watching it, was yeah, it seemed genuine to me. I'd really be interested in his defense, asking somebody who somebody pointed out this week that there were inconsistencies in his statements. I would like to hear one, because I haven't heard anything inconsistent about what Todd has said from any witnesses during the trial, his appeal, or this week. I haven't heard any piece of inconsistency so far. I'd be really interested what they bring up.
Yeah, totally. So, I think we're like right at an hour. I don't know if like I'd be definitely interested in if you wanted to come back on again, like in a couple days after we hear some more. Um,
Sure.
and you did great, by the way. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to tell this is your first time ever. You know, like you did
Right.
very well.
Thanks.
I've been interested the entire time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I hope he has a good week. I hope his attorneys have a good week.
Yeah, if you guys are praying people, I mean, give a little prayer for Todd. Like, I just want justice to be served. Like, I want those kids, like, and his kids are so big now. It's like it's bittersweet to see them there at his trial because that's cool that they are there, but like they're so big, he missed out on so much, you know.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, chat. Thank you to my guest, and I guess that's it.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Also, there's a Facebook group. It's Todd Mullis is Innocent or something like that. I highly recommend it. They're all nice, great people, and have a nice night. Bye.